Press room. Thank you for following our daily midday briefing online and also live on Europe by satellite. It's Wednesday, 9th of June. Let me start our announcements today by informing you about the adoption of our infringement cycle for the month of June. As you know, in order to help people and companies take full advantage of our internal market and of the opportunities offered by EU law, the European Commission is in permanent dialogue with the member states that do not comply with EU law. We try to solve such situations through dialogue, but when needed, we also open infringement procedures against those member states. And I can announce that today's infringement decisions include 83 letters of formal notice, 87 reasoned opinions, and 9 referrals to the Court of Justice of the EU. The Commission, at the same time, is also closing 239 open cases. You can find more detailed information about all these cases and about the infringement package in our daily news, and of course our specialized spokespeople will be happy to exchange with you about their particular cases. Then let me give now the floor to Peter, who has an announcement about the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue. Peter.
I can announce that the next round of EU-facilitated dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina will take place next week in Brussels on Tuesday. It will be attended by President of Serbia Aleksandar Vučić and for the first time by the new Prime Minister of Kosovo Albin Kurti. This meeting will be facilitated by High Representative Josep Borrell and EU Special Representative for the dialogue Miroslav Lajčák.
Thank you very much, Peter. Je passe au français, donc permettez-moi par la suite de vous rappeler nos prochains rendez-vous et événements de presse pour aujourd'hui même. Nous limiterons la durée de ces midday à 40 minutes pour permettre à la commissaire Johansson et au ministre de la Migration de la Grèce de commencer leur point de presse dans les VIP corner à midi 40. Cela sera suivi par une conférence de presse de la vice-présidente exécutive Margrethe Vestager à 13h15. Cette conférence de presse concerne une enquête sectorielle dans le domaine de la concurrence. Vers 14h, ensuite, vous pourriez suivre les vice-présidents Maros Šefčovič sur EBS pour sa conférence de presse suite à la réunion du comité mixte Union européenne-Royaume-Uni. Et enfin, à 14h45, nous allons organiser pour vous un briefing technique, un background, sur l'enquête sectorielle présentée par la vice-présidente Vestager plus tôt. Et à la fin, je peux vous annoncer que demain, à 9h du matin, la présidente von der Leyen participera à une conférence de presse conjointe avec le président du Conseil européen Charles Michel, en amont du sommet G7 qui commence vendredi. Cette conférence de presse est organisée par nos collègues du Conseil européen. Et avec ceci, je peux déjà passer à vos questions. Merci, comme toujours, de soulever votre main dans les systèmes si vous avez des questions pour nous aujourd'hui. Et je vois que la première main levée est celle de Tania. Tania, can you hear me?
Yes, oui, je vous entends. Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Tout va bien, merci.
Tout va bien. Ok, je pense que ça doit être probablement une question pour Peter. Donc, je suis de l'agence de presse macédonienne et j'ai une question sur la décision du président américain de sanctionner toute personne qui entrave et qui déstabilise la région des Balkans occidentaux. Donc Biden a signé ce décret exécutif hier. Je voudrais savoir d'abord si l'Union européenne a un commentaire là-dessus, mais je voudrais aussi savoir si c'est le genre de décision courageuse que l'Union européenne pourrait prendre à son tour plutôt que de faire circuler des non-papers sur les changements de frontières que personne ne dément et personne ne confirme. Voilà, merci.
Merci Tania. Peter?
Merci Tania. Ce n'est pas pour nous commenter les décisions de l'administration américaine. C'est une chose. L'autre chose est que nous avons notre propre engagement avec les partenaires dans les Balkans occidentaux. Un exemple très fort est la dernière discussion du Conseil des affaires étrangères où le sujet des Balkans occidentaux et notre engagement, notre coopération avec les partenaires de cette région était un des points principaux dans l'agenda. Aussi, un autre exemple, c'est la tradition renouvelée par le haut représentant Josep Borrell avoir régulièrement discussions informelles avec les leaders des Balkans occidentaux sur le sujet, sur les problèmes de cette région, dans une forme d'un dîner informel qui a lieu le mois dernier. Donc, notre engagement est très fort avec les partenaires dans cette région et une discussion ou une réflexion sur sanctions possibles, comme tu as mentionné, ce n'est pas dans un ordre de jour. Une chose qu'on doit appeler, c'est chaque décision sur chaque régime de sanctions potentielles, c'est un sujet d'unanimité dans le Conseil, ça veut dire entre les pays membres. Donc, si le pays membre trouve accord sur un régime de sanctions, on va procéder avec ça. Mais comme je dis, dans ce sujet sur le pays, sur les partenaires dans les Balkans occidentaux, ce n'est pas dans l'ordre du jour discuter sur les sanctions.
Merci Peter. Je veux maintenant vous inviter à tenir votre main levée si vous avez des questions pour Peter à ce sujet. Donc seulement si vous avez des questions pour Peter, s'il vous plaît, gardez votre main levée. Je pense que Khalid a une question pour Peter. Vas-y. Khalid, you need to change your mic source in order to be able to connect. So, can we do that? We don't have Khalid on the line, so I will try to get back to you later. So, I invite other colleagues to keep their hand raised if they have a question for Peter on external affairs. I believe that Erisa has a question for Peter. Go ahead, Erisa.
Thank you, Dana. No, it's for Adalbert. It's not for Peter. So that's why I'm queuing. I'm sorry.
Good. But while queuing, don't keep your hand up because otherwise we assume that it's for Peter, please. So we try once again with Khalid. Khalid, I think we have you on the line. Go
yes,
ahead.
This is Khalid Farooqi from Geo Television, Pakistan. My question directed to Peter regarding yesterday's address of High Representative to Parliament. He has given a figure that European Union spent 3.5 billion in last 20 years on development in Afghanistan. I would like to know how much money European Union is spent on military in Afghanistan, and also that will European Union ever develop its own foreign policy or always follow the US, which has been disastrous for the last 50 years in different countries in intervention?
Question, Khalid. Peter will attempt to provide an answer, but we are not sure we got the sense of everything that you got. Certain words were not clear for us here. The sound wasn't perfect, but he will make an attempt.
Indeed, I would like to ask for clarification because I didn't hear properly. Which funding you meant? Like how much money was spent on what exactly?
High Representative told that last 20 years, European Union spent 3.5 billion euros on development in Afghanistan.
Yes, and you wanted to know like, how much money out of this amount was spent on something specific, but I didn't understand that something specific you were.
No, I just wanted to know, beside that, how much money European Union is spent on military in Afghanistan. This is only development aid.
Military, okay. Okay, thank you. Now I understand. It's military. Well, you know that the EU is not doing military spending in countries around the world, and for that you would need to ask the North Atlantic Alliance, the NATO, which was and still is involved in helping the Afghanistan security forces and army to build up their capacities. Now, when it comes to the position of the European Union, of course, it's not true that the EU is following anyone else. It's not following the US, it's not following anyone else. But the basic principle of our foreign policy is that if we can do something with the partners, like-minded partners around the world, we do it together, based on EU decisions and EU interests. And the EU policy on Afghanistan, like on any other foreign policy issue, is based on the decision, unanimous decision by all member states, in this case agreed by all 27 member states. So this is a sovereign decision by 27 member states translated into EU position. So whatever we do in Afghanistan and with Afghanistan, helping the country to overcome its challenges and helping the population, which is suffering tremendously under the circumstances in this country until today because of the violence and continued unrest. So these are positions adopted by European Union and its member states. It's not following anyone, but if we can, in the implementation of our positions, which are following our interests and our desire to help people in those countries, if we can find like-minded partners, we of course are willing to cooperate, be it the United States, be it neighbors of Afghanistan, be it anyone else who has the same honest and transparent intentions with Afghanistan and its people.
Very much, Peter. So please keep your hand raised at this point if you have additional questions for Peter, so on foreign affairs. Je vois la main de Christian levée, donc Christian, vas-y, si c'est une question pour Peter.
Oui, bonjour Peter. En fait, j'aimerais comprendre une histoire un peu compliquée, qui est une décision du tribunal de l'Union européenne aujourd'hui qui a annulé avec un motif assez spécial qui est le motif d'erreur d'appréciation du Conseil dans sa décision en 2019 de continuer le renouvellement automatique de l'inscription de l'ancien président ukrainien et de son fils sur la liste des sanctions. C'était justement pour aider l'Ukraine à recouvrer d'importantes sommes qui ont été détournées. Donc ma question, c'est je voudrais savoir, est-ce que le président, ça veut dire qu'en fait, le président Yukhanovitch et son fils doivent sortir de la liste des sanctions ou pas du tout? Et je voudrais savoir si une décision comme celle-là, qui touche au renouvellement automatique de sanctions, ça va concerner, ça risque d'avoir une incidence sur d'autres régimes de sanctions. Je pense au Bélarus, je pense à d'autres pays où des dirigeants sont sur des listes depuis bien des années. Yanukovych est sur la liste des sanctions depuis 2014. Merci.
Merci Christiane. Bonjour. Sur la décision des cours du tribunal de l'Union européenne sur l'annulation de la décision, nous avons pris la note et maintenant c'est pour le Conseil de faire l'analyse de ce jugement et aussi les implications de ce jugement. Pour expliquer un peu les conséquences de comment ça fonctionne, Viktor Yanukovych et son fils restent soumis à des mesures restrictives de l'Union européenne sur la base d'un acte juridique adopté cette année 2021 et d'en exposer des motifs modifiés qui ne font pas partie de cette contestation faite par M. Yanukovych initiée dans 2019. Donc, le régime ukrainien de sanctions contre le détournement des fonds est en place jusqu'à 6 mars de l'année prochaine, 2022, et est réexaminé chaque année dans une base annuelle. Donc, la désignation de Viktor et d'Alexander Yanukovych fera l'objet d'un réexamen et le renouvellement dans ce cas nécessitera aussi un consensus de tous les pays membres.
Merci Peter. Je vous prie à ce stade de garder la main levée si vous avez des questions. Pour Peter, je vois que Christian a d'abord une question de suivi. Vas-y Christian.
Oui, très brièvement, ce qui veut dire qu'en fait la décision du tribunal n'a pas vraiment de conséquences pour le président Yanukovych. Il ne peut pas crier victoire en disant que la justice européenne a défait la décision du Conseil. C'est ça que je voudrais comprendre.
Non, comme je dis, il y a des listings, des sanctions qui sont en place toujours. Et je voudrais rappeler une chose, que M. Yanukovych et son fils sont désignés ou sont sur les sanctions européennes depuis 2014 sur la base d'une procédure qui court toujours, procédure pénale engagée par les autorités ukrainiennes pour détournement des fonds publics dans d'un montant particulièrement élevé. Et la mesure de gel des avoirs est en place contre ces deux individus pour faciliter le recouvrement des avoirs par l'État ukrainien si les accusations de détournement sont confirmées par les tribunaux nationaux. Donc la procédure est en cours. Vous savez que ce n'est pas très facile parce que l'investigation, les activités dans l'Ukraine ne sont pas facilitées par M. Yanukovych parce qu'il reste en Russie. Nous entendons de notre partenaire ukrainien qu'il n'y a pas beaucoup de coopération, il n'y a pas aucune coopération de la partie du côté des autorités russes dans cette situation, donc il n'y a pas aucune coopération juridique, donc c'est un peu compliqué, mais la mesure de gel des avoirs est en place et M. Yanukovych reste dans la liste.
Merci Peter. Donc je vous en prie, gardez votre main levée à ce stade si vous avez des questions pour Peter sur les affaires étrangères. Je vois encore quelques mains levées. D'abord, je pense que Khalid a une question de suivi. Essayons rapidement Khalid pour pouvoir passer à d'autres sujets.
Yes, addition to my previous question, because we are very concerned about Afghanistan's situation right now in Pakistan, because Americans are asking bases now in Afghanistan when they are departing, in Pakistan when they are departing from Afghanistan. Has European Union is part of this demand to have new bases in Pakistan to control Afghan situation and civil unrest?
Again, the European Union is not involved in military activities related to Afghanistan. But I can say that for the European Union, Afghanistan is very important. And one example of this is also the debate in the European Parliament yesterday and the remarks by High Representative Borrell, who stressed very much that the European Union will make every effort to support the peace process and to remain a committed partner to the Afghan people. And you know that Afghanistan is a subject of discussions. It was the subject of discussions during the last FAC, and the European attention will stay focused on Afghanistan because we care for Afghanistan, we care for its people, and as High Representative has said, we remain committed in our efforts to help the population and to help the country in the difficult times to advance the peace process.
Thank you, Peter. I believe that Gerakina has a question for you as well. Gerakina, go ahead.
Peter, I need to go back to the dialogue issue. Can you reveal what will be in the agenda? And can you formally say that this is a resumption of an old process that had started since 2011, rather than a new process as a new Prime Minister of Kosovo claims? But first the agenda and the topics, if it's possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, this will be the first meeting of the dialogue attended by the new Prime Minister of Kosovo, Albin Kurti. That's why the agenda is expected to, we are expecting that the President and the Prime Minister will discuss the way forward in the dialogue. So this is the main point and the main intention of the discussions, to discuss the way forward because we have a new partner on the Kosovo side. Now, when it comes to the dialogue, it's not an old dialogue, it's an ongoing dialogue. It's an ongoing process in which the EU is involved as a facilitator, and this is a process through which the EU or the European future of both Kosovo and Serbia are advancing. So the European future of Kosovo and Serbia go through EU-facilitated dialogue. This dialogue is in place and is running since 2011, and it continues. Next meeting will be next Monday. And in the course of this ongoing process, the partners have changed, the government have changed, but the commitments and the process remain. So all issues discussed so far within the framework of this EU-facilitated dialogue and in the future meetings of the dialogue will be and are key for comprehensive agreement, which should be at the end of this dialogue, the comprehensive agreement on the normalization of relations. And the European Union and its member states, but as you heard most recently also from the United States, all of us, we are expecting from both countries continued commitment to engage in this dialogue and to implement all the past agreements and show the willingness and the necessary readiness for a compromise in order to arrive to the final comprehensive agreement on the normalization of relations between Serbia and Kosovo.
Thank you, Peter. I will now further invite you to keep your hand raised if you have questions for Peter. I believe that Natalia indeed wants to ask a question to Peter. Go ahead, Natalia.
Hello, do you hear me well? Do you hear me well?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm in a train station. I just wanted to know regarding the infringement package. There is starting procedures against Spain for the transposition of the European arrest warrant legislation. I just wanted to know exactly what is the problem with Spain in this regard. I mean, like, what is exactly the things that are not being transposed or applied correctly in Spain regarding this? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Natalia. We were still on foreign affairs questions, so I will make one last call to check if there are additional questions for Peter on foreign affairs. There is no other question for Peter on this matter today, so thank you very much, Peter. And then indeed, I will invite Christian Wiegand to come on stage to provide an answer to Natalia on the infringement procedure referring to the European arrest warrant. Christian.
Yes, thank you, Natalia, for that question. So indeed, we have launched infringement proceedings today against Belgium, Greece, the Netherlands, Hungary, and Spain on the European arrest warrant. Let me remind you, and you will see this also in our daily news, that these are not the first on this file. So there's already a number of ongoing infringement proceedings against 10 other member states at the moment. As regards Spain, and this is similar to the cases of Greece and Hungary, to explain a bit, the framework decision on the European arrest warrant does not provide for a nationality exception, which means that actually many member states had to change their constitutions in order to correctly transpose the framework decision. We detected, however, that some member states, including Spain, attach additional stricter conditions to surrender of their own nationals and lower conditions for the surrender of other EU nationals who reside on their territory. Such an approach is contrary to the European arrest warrant framework decision, but also contrary more generally to the non-discrimination principle enshrined in Article 18 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union. So this is what this case is about.
Thank you so much, Christian. So I will now at this stage invite you to keep your hands up if you have additional questions on infringements on the matters that Christian covers, to avoid to have a parade of spokespeople coming and going from the podium. So you are familiar with his files, and therefore please keep your hand up if you have questions for Christian on his matters. I believe then Joseph has a question for Christian. Go ahead, Joseph.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead. Yes, we can.
Great. I believe it's a question to Christian. So some member states still do not comply with the rules agreed upon the travel restrictions in the EU. And the European Commission has sent a letter to those member states already in February about it. But Finland, for example, just still ignores the collectively agreed rules. So when will the European Commission take the legal steps to stop this ignorance? And another question related to that is that also related to COVID certificate, that if we see that the countries ignore those collectively agreed rules right now, then why should we expect them to behave differently from the 1st of July?
Thank you, Josep. Christian?
Yeah, well, you will remember that we have indeed sent a round of letters already a while back to a number of member states who were not, you're not respecting the rules and were going beyond and had stricter rules, particularly some that had also travel bans in place. The latest letter on this was sent to Ireland, which has in the meantime rectified to a great extent the situation, at least for EU nationals. The Commission remains, of course, in regular contact with all the member states that are still concerned by this issue. Our position is very clear. Member states agreed on a coordinated approach to manage any restrictions to free movement in the EU. These recommendations are extremely clear and they should be everyone's compass. As you know, we have now also proposed to update these recommendations. And we are working closely with the Portuguese presidency, with the Council more generally, to ensure that this can also be quickly adopted, so that we will, for the summer, be ready also with this new set of rules, and of course also with the EU digital COVID certificate, which was legally approved also by the European Parliament, by the way, today. So we will continue to work towards a coordinated approach, and of course the certificate will help us a lot with this, but it will also be important to find an agreement on the more detailed rules in the free movement recommendation.
Thank you, Christian. I will please invite you to keep your questions short, because we have a limited time for this midday today. As I said, we have 5 press events, one after another today, so we are limited in time. But I guess that, yes, the next person on my list to ask a question is Hans. I assume, Hans, that your question is for Christian, because we still have Christian on stage.
Yes, it is, and apologies for not having the camera on. I'm on a train, so it's train day for journalists today. But my question is on the infringement procedure against Germany concerning the ruling of the Constitutional Court. I would like to know why the Commission has launched this procedure, or what it hopes to achieve with it, because the German government has tried to come up with a solution that you could describe as EU-friendly, and has sort of sought to solve this matter in the best way possible. That's at least their argumentation. So and now the government, of course, can't tell the Constitutional Court what to do. So what does the Commission actually want the German government to do about this? And secondly, are you concerned that this won't just lead to an escalating standoff between Karlsruhe and Luxembourg, the European Court of Justice, which could then also be a precedent for other countries like Poland, Hungary, saying like, look, they're also violating the EU law and even don't comply with infringement decisions. So why shouldn't we do the same? Thank you.
Thank you. Christian?
Well, let me start by repeating our very clear position that we have taken for a long time on this. EU law has primacy over national law. All judgments by the European Court of Justice are binding on member states' authorities, including national courts. These fundamental principles have been breached by the PSPP, or Weiss judgment of the German Constitutional Court, which declared a decision of the European Central Bank and the judgment of the European Court of Justice to be ultra vires, meaning that it is going beyond its competence. The German court thereby deprived the judgment of the European Court of Justice of its legal effect in Germany, breaching the principle of the primacy of EU law. After having conducted a detailed analysis and following an informal dialogue with the German authorities, the Commission has therefore decided today to send a letter of formal notice to Germany for violation of fundamental principles of EU law by its Federal Constitutional Court. This step is necessary as the PSPP judgment constitutes a serious precedent both for the future practice of the German Constitutional Court itself and for the Supreme and Constitutional Courts and tribunals of other member states. This could threaten the integrity of union law and could open the way to a Europe à la carte. The European Union is and remains a community based on law, and the last word on EU law is always spoken in Luxembourg.
Thank you, Christian. Please keep your hand raised if you have additional questions for Christian. First, I see Hans. Hans, please keep your follow-up question very short, because we have a long list of colleagues who want to ask questions, and we have little time today. Hans.
Very short. Aren't you concerned about an escalating standoff between the German Constitutional Court and the European Court of Justice, which would in the end damage all sides? Thank you.
We are not concerned about anything. All we wish is to protect the foundations of the EU's legal order. And Christian recalled what were the principles which underlie the foundations of the EU's order. And in our role as guardians of the treaty, it is our duty, and it's because we have this extremely important role given by the treaties that we have taken the step that we have announced today. Thank you very much. Now, I think Thomas has a question on this subject as well. Thomas, go ahead.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you. It's also part of the foundations of the EU legal order that courts are independent. So does the EU Commission recognize the independence of the German Constitutional Court? And if it does so, what could the German government do to comply with your concerns?
Christian?
Of course, we fully respect the independence of the courts. That is very clear. Well, I mean, this is the way this works. We are, of course, addressing the letter of formal notice to the German authorities, as we always do, and it is then for the member state to identify possible solutions. Any solution must be in line with EU law and respect the principle of the primacy of EU law. And as you're trying to hint at what could be done, well, ultimately also a change in the case law in Germany or a judgment by the European Court of Justice could have an important clarifying function in this context.
Thank you, Christian. So please keep your hands up if you have additional questions for Christian on this subject or on other infringement cases that he follows. I believe that Sandro has then a question for Christian. Sandro, go ahead.
Oui, bonjour, merci pour la question en français, si vous le voulez bien. Concernant la procédure en infraction pour la Belgique et le RGPD, pourriez-vous me dire si c'est bien une toute première procédure sur cette question et qu'est-ce qui est reproché à la Belgique? Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Sandro. Effectivement, Christian va te répondre. Et je suppose qu'on a fini avec les questions sur les cas précédents. Donc, on peut passer maintenant à cela. Vas-y.
OK. Alors, comme tu vas voir dans notre communiqué de presse, ça concerne une violation de l'article 52 de la GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, qui dit que les autorités de protection des données doivent exercer leurs tâches dans une manière indépendante. Et la Commission considère que ça, ce n'est pas le cas en Belgique. Simplement dit, et c'est pour ça qu'on a lancé cette procédure aujourd'hui. Oui, je pense que c'est ça.
Merci beaucoup. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions sur ce cas spécifique, sur la Belgique, sur la protection des données, l'autorité sur la protection des données? Je vois quelques mains levées, mais je ne suis pas convaincue que les questions que des journalistes veulent poser sont à ce sujet. Mathieu, est-ce que tu as une question sur ce cas spécifique, la Belgique et la protection des données?
Oui, bonjour. Non, mais c'était un follow-up au cas précédent, effectivement, la cour de Karlsruhe. Ma question, donc, effectivement, portait sur ce que l'Allemagne pouvait faire concrètement. Donc, vous avez un petit peu répondu, mais dans un élément de contexte, est-ce que vous pouvez dire si c'est la première fois que la Commission attaque un État sur cette question de la primauté du droit de l'UE auprès de la Cour? Et pourquoi finalement avoir attendu plus d'1 an après cet arrêt pour agir, puisque finalement tous les éléments étaient connus dès le premier jour? Il y avait eu des briefings de votre part par le service juridique qui exposait exactement les mêmes enjeux au lendemain de l'arrêt en mai 2020. Donc pourquoi avoir attendu 1 an pour agir? Merci.
Question Mathieu. En ce qui concerne la dernière question, je peux répondre très facilement et rapidement. Comme j'ai rappelé en début de ce briefing, nous commençons toujours par les dialogues avec les États membres. Nous essayons de trouver des solutions qui n'impliquent pas le lancement d'une procédure d'infraction. Donc c'est pour cela que le dialogue parfois prend du temps. C'est le cas pour ce cas-ci et c'est le cas pour tous les cas que nous étudions et dans lesquels nous nous engageons. Donc la réponse à cela est plutôt claire. Sur la première question, je pense que Christian a déjà répondu. Je ne sais pas s'il a des éléments à ajouter.
Je peux ajouter quelques éléments peut-être parce que tu as dit ou pensé que c'est la première fois qu'on fait quelque chose comme ça. C'est pas correct. Ce n'est pas correct. Alors, premièrement, c'est un principe que nous avons toujours défendu et nous allons défendre dans le futur aussi, le primauté de l'ordre européen. Et en effet, la Commission a aussi lancé des procédures d'infraction concernant les jugements des cours constitutionnels ou des cours suprêmes des États membres. Juste pour donner quelques exemples, il y a eu une procédure d'infraction lancée en 2014 contre un jugement du Conseil d'État en France. On a eu aussi 2 cas d'infraction contre l'Espagne et l'Italie, contre une décision des cours nationaux suprêmes. Et en effet, en décembre 2020, la Commission a aussi lancé une procédure d'infraction contre une décision du Cour suprême de United Kingdom, de Grande-Bretagne.
Merci beaucoup, Christian. Je pense que Thomas a une question des suivis. Je vous rappelle que nous devons finir notre midday briefing. Nous devons le finir maintenant. On accorde encore quelques minutes, le temps que la commissaire Johansson se prépare. Et je sais qu'il y a d'autres questions. Nous allons les prendre bilatéralement après, mais je donne encore la parole aux 4 journalistes qui se sont manifestés et qui sont sur mon écran en ce moment. Donc, de questions rapides et des réponses rapides des questions, s'il vous plaît. Donc, d'abord, Thomas.
Thank you. Christian, you just said that ultimately a change in case law in Germany or a judgment by the ECJ could remediate the situation. How would it be in the power of the German government to get to a judgment by the ECJ? Thank you.
Again, Thomas, of course, we have the highest respect of the independence of courts. It is also clear that the primacy of EU law is a fundamental principle that needs to be respected by everyone, including by the highest courts in our member states. Therefore, we have the tool of preliminary reference procedures normally, where highest courts can ask the ECJ in case things are not unclear. This is a fundamental principle to ensure that we have correct application of union law in all of the European Union for every citizen in the same way, and not at some point would arrive at some, as I said, sort of Europe a la carte or patchwork. As always, infringement procedures, letters of formal notice, are addressed to a member state, and it is for the highest state organs in that member state, in Germany in this case, to work on this issue and to work towards possible solutions.
Thank you, Christian. Next on my list is Susanna.
Thank you, Susana Freixas, SIC Expresso. A very quick question on the digital certificate. I just like to understand if you have any update on the number of member states connected to the EU gateway, and which countries do you expect to be the next connecting to the EU gateway? And I also would like to understand those countries already connected. Are they already in the position to verify all the 1 million certificates already issued as mentioned yesterday by the Commissioner? Thank you.
Thank you, Susanna. That would actually be a question to which Johannes has the answer, and if you don't mind, he will get back to you promptly after this midday briefing with all the data and the clarifications that you requested. I see that Virginie a une question sur la procédure contre l'Allemagne. Donc, Virginie, vas-y.
Oui, bonjour. Vous m'entendez?
Bien, vas-y.
C'est bon? Oui, je voulais revenir, Christian, sur ce que tu avais dit, qu'il y avait déjà eu des procédures lancées contre plusieurs pays sur cette thématique de la primauté du droit européen. Tu as parlé d'une procédure contre la France, Espagne, Italie et le lancement contre le Royaume-Uni. Je voulais savoir au moins sur les 3 premières, à savoir France, Espagne, Italie. J'imagine que la procédure contre le Royaume-Uni n'a pas abouti. Comment l'histoire s'était terminée?
Je pense que je vais revenir vers toi avec plus de détails bilatéralement.
Voilà,
parce que ce sont beaucoup de détails ici. Si je commence
il s'agit des cas qui ont été lancés il y a beaucoup d'années. Ça ne fait pas partie stricto sensu des cas que nous vous présentons aujourd'hui. Donc, Christian va prendre le temps pour trouver les réponses à tes questions très pertinentes, Virginie, et il va revenir vers toi tout de suite après. Je n'aurai plus le temps de prendre d'autres questions parce que la commissaire et le ministre grec attendent pour commencer leur point de presse. Donc, je vous remercie et nous allons revenir vers vous pour d'autres questions. Athanasios, I see that you have your hand raised, so I will call you and we are going to discuss bilaterally your question and you are going to have your answer. Apology for this. It's a busy day, 5 press events. Thank you and see you soon.